Welcome back to A Moment in History. I'm Seth Udinsky. Have you ever wondered what it would have been like to be a friend of the apostles in the early days of the church? I know I certainly have. And history reveals to us several men at the turn of the 1st century AD into the 2nd who learned and were discipled by the aging apostles at a very young age. One of these young men would go on, just like the apostles under which he learned, to give his life for the sake of the gospel when he too was an old man. His name was Polycarp, and he lived in present-day Turkey in the late 1st and early 2nd centuries AD. As with many Christian martyrs in the early centuries of the church, Polycarp's legacy is surrounded by legends and tradition, but as historians, we need to remember that tradition can sometimes be as reliable as a primary document since it has stood the test of time. And I believe the same can be said for Polycarp. So evidence suggests that Polycarp, born sometime in the 60s AD, was likely saved as a very young man and was discipled by the aging John the Apostle. Tradition tells us that Polycarp may have been the last surviving believer to have known one of the 12 apostles in life. So Polycarp became the pastor of the church in Smyrna in modern-day Turkey, probably at the request of John the Beloved himself, who as the very likely last surviving apostle of Jesus at the turn of the 1st century would have held incredible weight with his pastoral recommendations. So Polycarp was a faithful minister of the gospel throughout his whole life in the 2nd century AD. Now we have to remember, Rome is at the height of its power at this time, and Christianity represents a threat to the Roman state because the Roman political state was intimately intertwined with the Roman cult of the Pantheon. So to deny the lordship of Caesar and the gods and instead confess the lordship of Jesus Christ was a crime against the state, and it was punishable usually by death. This did not seem to bother or deter Polycarp one bit. In fact, by the year 155 AD or so, Polycarp was an old man, likely in his 80s, and he was taken into custody under the Romans for refusing to deny his faithfulness to Christ. Some legends tell of a story where an aged Polycarp, knowing he was about to be arrested, did not flee his pursuers, but instead invited the soldiers into his home to enjoy a meal before they would arrest him. Polycarp was condemned to burn for his faith. Now, there are other legends that tell of a divine miracle that happened upon his execution, where flames failed to harm the aged believer as he was tied to the stake. So enraged, the Roman soldiers then ran him through with the sword to kill him. At his execution, he allegedly uttered these famous words, 86 years have I served my Lord, and he has done me no wrong. How can I blaspheme my King and my Savior? Thanks so much for joining me once again for A Moment in History.